That's it started.
I'll just cover the initial announcement. Welcome everyone to the meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee, the Audit and Risk Committee rather, on the 16th of June. This meeting is being held remotely and will be made available as a webcast via the Council's website in order to allow the public access to the democratic process in East Lothian. East Lothian Council and NHS Lothian are data controllers under the Data Protection Act 2018, and data collected as part of the recording will be retained in accordance with the Council and NHS Lothian's policies on record retention. And the webcast of the meeting will be publicly available for 5 years from the date of the meeting. I don't have any apologies, so I'll just do the roll call of attendees. Councillor Akhtar.
Present.
Peter Cantley.
Is that me? Present?
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you. I didn't hear you properly. Sorry.
Jeremy Finlay.
Present.
Elizabeth Gordon.
Present.
David Binney.
Present.
And can I ask if any members have any declarations of interest? No. That's great. That's us ready to start the business, Chair.
Thank you. I'd just also like to welcome Stuart Allen, who is joining us in the role of temporary Chief Internal Auditor, because Duncan has stepped away to do another project, I believe.
That's right. Duncan is still within the council. He's on a 9-month secondment to information governance, returning at the end of January. So I'll be fulfilling his role for that period. We actually, with the Northern Audit and Governance Committee meeting this morning, a council one, and there was actually a paper kind of submitted to actually kind of formalise that, to make them aware. There's not actually been one submitted to this committee, so apologies for that. But yes, I'll be doing the job until towards the end of January.
That's fine, and thanks for explaining the background to that, Stuart. And I believe you were at our last meeting anyway as an observer. So,
I was, yes. So I recognise most people, and I think, well, so thank you.
Great, that's fine, thank you. Fiona, are you able to start the proceedings? Thanks.
Yeah. The minutes for approval is item 1, and that's the meeting on the 24th of March.
Thank you. I'll just go through the minutes and see if anyone has got any amendments or comments. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. Okay, looks like they don't have any comments there. And then to ask if there's any matters. Oh, sorry, Shameen, want to come in?
I'll just go on to the next part. It was just a kind of matters arising on.
Yeah, sorry, I was just about to ask for that. Yeah,
2.
Yeah. So go ahead, Shameen.
Yeah, it was just to ask around. I thought it's really helpful to have the community engagement documents that Kate and Jennifer are working on. It talks about community engagement document on IJB finances. I think that's a really important area of work for us to be able to let our partners and the public know around what our budget is, what's spent on, and where our gap is. And it was just to ask around progress on that area of work.
Thanks. David, are you best to come in on that one? David Hood?
Yeah, I can come in. Shameen, I'll need to follow up with Kate to see exactly where she's got in terms of that engagement around the IJB finances, and can certainly do that and get an update to members of this group fairly quickly for you on that.
That'd be great, thank you, because I know they're producing some packs, community engagement packs, and I think it'd be a really important area of work to include in there in a easy, accessible form to be able to understand the bigger picture.
Okay, I'll follow up and I'll come back to everybody in this committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, David. Does anyone else have anything under matters arising? No, I had one thing. I wasn't sure whether, having reflected on the minutes, I wondered whether we perhaps ought to have added some other items to our action log. Now, obviously, we are going to be looking at that next, but in the minutes, just a few points. First of all, we agreed at the last meeting to provide a 6-monthly update on the risk register to the main IJB. And I wondered whether, just to make sure it doesn't get lost, if we ought to put that on the action log. So we obviously had the full report on the Audit and Risk Committee to the last IJB. So it would be due in November, but I don't think there's an IJB meeting then. So I wondered if the next most appropriate meeting would be the December IJB for an update on the risk register. So we could potentially add that to the action log. Does anyone have any comments on that? Mike?
No, I would support that because I think it was me that said it. So it would be helpful to have it as a reminder on the action log. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. And then just in a similar vein, we also agreed that we would have an annual report on the work of the Audit and Risk Committee to the full IJB, as we had done, it had in May. And I think that was a good report that we had. So that would be due in May 2027. So also thought that we could add that to the action log again, so that doesn't get lost. Presumably Mike's nodding, so I assume you're happy with that. And the only other thing I noticed from the minutes, we'd agreed at the last meeting that this committee would receive a table detailing the previous internal audits for the last 3 years. And that was an action point for Duncan Steinbank. So I wondered if we could add that to the action log with a target date of the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting. Stuart, would that be all right with you?
Absolutely, and apologies, I'd missed that. So yes, we'll absolutely do that for the September meeting. Yes,
that's super. Thank you, Fiona. That all okay in terms of agreements for updates for the action log? Thanks. I don't have any other matters arising. I don't think anyone else did, so I think that completes that item on the agenda. Thanks.
Thank you. And we move on now to item 2, which is the Audit and Risk Committee's action log. And it's for consideration of the items that are there, any additions or items for closure.
Thank you. Okay, Mike, were you wanting to speak, or do you want me to go through each item?
I'm happy for you to go through if that's okay. That's
fine. So I think the one on action 6 of 25 to the basically it said that on this there would be an update provided at the June 2026 meeting. Now this is to do with sharing examples of good practice from other IJBs, and it was the point here was that Duncan was to speak to John Boyd about this action. John, has anything happened in that regard?
No, I don't have any update on that. Not picked that up, but we can we can pick it up as part of our year-end audit work.
Okay.
And we can share that.
That's fine. So when would we hear from you at the September meeting then?
Yeah, if it's in for the September.
Okay, thank you. So if we update that item to get an update at the September meeting, thank you. The next item was on 725, and this one was that it was to do with the response being prepared on the Scottish Government consultation on carers, breaks for carers. And a note that the IJB was providing a response by the 18th of May. Is that item now due to be closed? David, has been submitted, I assume?
Yes, it was submitted in line with the kind of timescales for that consultation. So I think from an action point of view, I think we can close it.
That's fine. Has anyone any comments on that? No, so I think that action can be complete. Oh, sorry, Shimeen, you want to
Sorry,
come in?
Elizabeth, my hand's maybe not going up quick enough today. The system's been a bit not that great. It was just to ask David, that's really helpful. It was really important for us as an IJB to make a response, because that's quite a really important, significant piece of work for us. But to maybe have a think about, as an audit and risk committee, that we've put our response, we'd raise our concerns, and one of the areas would be around ensuring that we're adequately supported to be able to deliver that. And I just wondered on that respect whether we would want to keep it on there as a policy area and a funding area that we would want as a audit and risk committee to be mindful of, because I think if we are funded adequately, then that's great. We'll be able to support as many carers as possible. But if not, that then places other risks and challenges, and how we manage and support that. I thought it would just be worth having a conversation around the future risks and challenges of ensuring how we meet this policy area.
Mike, you want to come in?
Yeah, it was just, I suppose, just to point out that one of the risks on our risk register is around legislation, and this is part of the Care Reform Act legislation. So we have it, I guess, in our sights, and we can talk about it under that risk if that's suitable.
Okay, as long as it's covered somewhere, that's helpful. Thank you.
I mean, I'd actually had the same thought, but I think, as Mike said, if we've got that impact of legislation risk, which we obviously will consider at every meeting. So I think I'm also comfortable that it's going to be firmly on our radar going forward. So I think that means that if everybody is happy for that item to also be closed on the action log, then thanks. And then the last item, the risk register review, which obviously Mike and Duncan have done work on, and we're going to be looking at later in the meeting. Mike, I'm not sure whether we should leave it open until we've firmly adopted the new risk register.
Yeah, that's fine. We can do it. So I speculated a sort of post risk register review template on the 26th of May, which hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at. And that's what we'll discuss through the risk register as part of that item. But happy to leave it open until it's approved, if you like.
That's fine. And it might be that at the end of this meeting, we'll all decide that we're happy and it can be closed. But we'll discuss it where it appears on the agenda, and we can review that. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, I think that concludes that item, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. Moving on to item 3, which is the 25-26 draft unaudited annual accounts, and it's a report by the Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you. So Mike, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. So I can't believe it's come round that quickly. It's another year. I can remember doing the first one last year. Anyway, this paper presents the IJB's unaudited annual accounts for 2025-26, and it seeks approval for them to be published and to be presented for audit. So that's what we're asking of the Audit and Risk Committee today. The paper itself sets out the legal requirement that we have to produce a set of accounts, and also sets out the established process that's in place, which allows us to follow their route through to the final presentation of audited accounts to the Audit and Risk Committee in September. So we'll bring the audited accounts back to the Audit and Risk Committee in September. The report itself, or the paper, highlights the main sections of the accounts. And as always, I'm grateful to the people who have contributed to pulling all that information together, or providing me with the information to allow me to pull it all together. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Does anyone have any questions? Shamin.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. I think it's really helpful just to get the kind of summary of a lot of the things that have happened, and I suppose looking at the really positives of how we make sure that's articulated further. And I just wondered in around that these are not just about the figures, about people. And I just wondered whether over the year we've seen that ability to shift in the set aside, and I just wondered if that's something that you might be able to reflect on in regards to our shift in our finances around that area.
Yeah, I could certainly reflect on that as part of the process. We haven't seen much movement or any movement in the set aside, but it's still very much on the radar and still very much a topic that we discuss and review as we go through the financial year.
Thanks. Shameen, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, no, that's it. Just it'd be useful just to keep an eye on, and just how, as a integrated body, we support that and look at how we can work far more in an integrated way and support set aside to be able to do things differently, which might then potentially shift some of the resources into more community-based ones. And I'm just mindful of the paragraph around, you know, our role and purpose, and how we're trying to get the best outcomes with the finance resources that we've got. Yeah, it'd be something I'd be quite keen to keep our eye on, of how we support and encourage that and see more of that happening.
Thanks, Shameen. Any other points? Mike, just a flag, I think there's maybe a slight issue with your microphone. Don't know if it's just me or if it seems a bit crackly, if other people experiencing that. Yeah. We can make you out, but it's just I'm having to listen quite hard to catch it. Thanks. I just had a couple of points. One of them actually had a quick chat with Mike about yesterday, and it's really a question probably for external audit, in terms of the way that is a very sort of minor formatting issue in many ways, the way that the membership of the IJB is presented in the accounts at page 22 and 23, where it's just showing it at a particular, obviously the end date in time, so 31st March 2026, that shows the membership. And it just at the very foot of the table reflects where there have been any changes. So it indicates that Marilyn McNeil, for example, resigned on 18th December 2025, but the role was vacant at 31st March, and that Liz Allen replaced Lynn Jardine. Is it, I take it that would normally be fine just to present it at that date, as opposed to providing the full picture in the table? John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so for the disclosure in the accounts, you can update to the reporting date. Disclosures and such as the remuneration report would be for the financial year ended 31st of March. So it would be at the point in time. So basically anyone who was in post up to the 31st of March. But when you're disclosing membership of the board, normally actually you would have all members up to the date of signing. So it would be anyone who's joined and just a note of their start date and leavers date.
Thanks, John. So, Mike, can we just get that amended in the document then? Thank you, Mike's nodding. Okay, that was my first question. I noticed very, very minor, extremely minor typos on page 27 and 28, but they're tiny. So I take it would be acceptable just to email them over to you, Mike. I don't think they have any consequence, so thanks. And then the last thing, I had a question about page 34 in the pack. So where we are referring to the situation with the financial projections and the underspend on the council side, we obviously, it's detailed what the main drivers for the underspend were. My question really, Mike, was whether the management commentary should basically reflect the fact that it did highlight the risk of inaccurate financial forecasting, and that work is ongoing to reduce this in the future. Because obviously it is to be welcomed that we had an underspend, but the slight issue is the fact that why did we not know sooner that this was happening? And obviously we've got an explanation there, but we need to be assured going forward that we have got an accurate picture, because obviously in certain circumstances it might go the other way, which would be extremely unfortunate. So I wondered if an extra sentence might reflect that. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Mike.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Right. No, that's fine. I'm happy to consider that and have a look at how we can fit that in. I suppose it's about getting that balance of how much detail we go into and how much how we keep it at a reasonably high level. But you're right. It wasn't an expected position, so it probably is worth highlighting, but also highlighting the fact that we still have the confidence in the systems that we've got in place as well. And we are doing some work to just see if we can refine those systems and make them more responsive.
Thanks, Mike. Shireen, you want to come in?
No, I read that section as well, and then what I saw as just on page 3418 of our pack was there was 3 bullet points under social care, and I thought that that gave me the narrative of where the underspend came from. The main area of underspend within the year in position was staffing, driven by significant recruitment and retention challenges across a number of services. Income recovery was also higher than expected, and the pressures with commission services were lower than anticipated. And there was a favourable year-end positions offset pressures elsewhere, particularly with care at home services where demand exceeded capacity. And I thought that gave me enough narrative. So it was more around the services and staffing challenges and recruitment. That is how I've interpreted that, rather than inaccuracy of financial information. But I can get clarity from yourself, Mike.
Yeah, I don't think there was necessarily inaccuracy in financial information. It was more about the fact that we hadn't forecast an underspend of that magnitude. So the information wasn't inaccurate at the end of the year or leading up to it. It's just that we hadn't identified that swing in the last quarter. But there were a number of factors that resulted in that happening. So it wasn't as though there was system failure or anything like that, in my view. So yes, there's I suppose the systems in place were working and are working, and we're now, as part of this afternoon, we will look at whether we think there's still a significant what level of risk we have around that issue, and whether or not we need to change that. And also we're looking at ways in which we can refine those systems and processes just to make them more receptive to change, and allow us to forecast in even more accurately, if you like.
Thanks. Tricia, do you want to come in as well? You're on mute, Tricia.
Thank you. Just to echo Shameen's point there, and also partly to be looking ahead, if we've had an underspend because of recruitment and retention challenges, that is bad as well as good. And I'm wondering, can we look forward to next year? Do we have a sense of where we'll be with that next year going forward in terms of recruitment and retention? And while it's nice to save money and end up with an underspend, that's actually a concern in lots of other ways. So do we have a sense of whether that will go back to normal in the current year, or whether we'll have the same issue again?
I don't know if David's got any comments around that. We're continuing across both health and social care to try and fill vacancies that some of which have been outstanding for a while. And it's about how do we can we change our approach? Can we change the level of vacancy that we're looking at to try and make it more attractive to people? But it is still a challenge for us. And David, you might have a bit more information on that.
Yeah, happy to come in on that. So I think, Trish, we've seen vacancies this year in a number of areas, including adult social work. And I think what we have managed to do is recruit into the majority of those vacancies now. So I think hopefully that turnover will be less than what we've previously seen on the back of that positive recruitment. I think with the nature of some of the care services that we provide, there is always an element of turnover, and I think that is a challenge. So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said actually we want to have people in post. That's the important thing for us in terms of delivering those services to the people of East Lothian. I think from a financial perspective, one of the things that we'll come on to talk about later on is just some of the kind of how we're updating the financial forecast to make sure that the correlation between that turnover, that recruitment is linked back to the financial position on a kind of more regular basis. But I think I am hopeful that that level of vacancy that we've seen in this financial year that's just finished, certainly for adult social work, will be less than previous years, but there will still be an element of turnover that we need to think about how we factor into the regular reporting on top of what we've historically done on a quarterly basis.
Thanks, David. Trish, you want to come back in?
I was just going to come back on that and say, yes, I think that it's very important to get the reporting of this right, because we are not an organisation which is deliberately fudging recruitment to save money. Quite the reverse. We want people in post, and we want to have those jobs filled. You know, there are organisations in the world where there is a deliberate delay in recruitment, and that is our way of saving money, which I don't really like, but we're not doing that, and I think the reporting on that has to be very robust and clear.
David, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to echo and support what Trish has said there in terms of this is not a financial strategy in terms of holding vacancies to create an underspend. And I think in a number of areas we've actually had the conversation about potentially over recruiting to allow us to make sure that we are factoring in that kind of element of natural turnover. So yeah, just to be crystal clear, we are not holding vacancies to create a financial underspend.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. I guess I think, Shamina, in terms of your point about the sort of the bullet points in the accounts, I was very clear on the reasons for the underspend. It wasn't that I was wanting an extra note in the management commentary about. It was merely just the impact of the forecasting on where we ended up, in a sense that it hadn't been anticipated for us, and I thought that should be reflected. I obviously really welcome what we've heard from David and so on, and it sounds like the situation is reassuring. So it was just literally an extra sentence that I was wanting. I think, Mike, you think you thought that we could do something about that if everybody else is happy. Anyone got any comments? Mike, do you want to come back in?
No, I'm happy to draft up an additional sentence and see if I can share that with you, if you're happy with it, we can put that in. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else? Oh, Shameen, you want to come in?
Yeah, just when this goes to the IJB, I think it might be useful to get a bit of feedback on our workforce strategy, just to get a reassurance that this issue that we've identified in the accounts has been picked up elsewhere in the workforce strategy. So if we're seeing that as a recruitment and retention as an issue, how as a IJB we're addressing that as we move forward. I think that might be the bigger issue that we need to make sure that we're reassured that has been picked up elsewhere in that strategy.
Thanks, Shameen, and that sounds sensible. Anyone get any other comments on the accounts? I don't think so. So in that case, members are being asked to agree the draft annual accounts can be published and presented for audit. Everybody happy with that?
Great.
Nods. Okay. Thank you. Thanks everyone, and that concludes that item, Fiona.
Thank you. Item 4 is the East Lothian IJB annual governance statement, and that's presented by the Chief Internal Auditor.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. This is the East Lothian IJB annual governance statement, and in terms of recommendations, the Audit and Risk Committee members are asked to consider the draft annual governance statement 25/26, which is Appendix 1, which explains East Lothian IJB's governance arrangements and system of internal control and reports on their effectiveness for the year ended 31st March 2026, and provide any commentary and approve for inclusion in the draft annual accounts 25/26. So there will be an opportunity if members feel there's something they would like to add to the draft statement. There is an opportunity to do that at this stage. Can I take you to Appendix 1, to the draft statement? The introduction. The annual governance statement explains the East Lothian IJB's governance arrangements and system of internal control and reports on their effectiveness. The governance statement is structured around the 7 core principles of good governance as per the SIPFA SOLIS framework for delivering good governance in local government, and that's statements A to G. I'd just like to go through and highlight perhaps a few of the changes that there have been in 25/26. So in terms of principle A, if I turn over the page, in October 2025, the board approved an updated East Lothian IJB Code of Conduct, and members were reminded of their personal responsibilities under the code. We look at Principle B. In February 2026, the board approved the IJB Communications and Engagement Strategy 2026-2030. And under Principle C, the East Lothian IJB Strategic Plan 2025 to 2030 was approved by the board in February 26. And under D, the IJB issued directions to the Partners for Service Delivery in June 2025. Under E, a 3-year strategic workforce plan 25 to 28 was approved by the board in May 2025. In terms of under Principle F, an updated IJB risk management policy and strategy was approved through the Audit and Risk Committee in March 2026. And moving on to G, an annual performance report for 25/26 is being prepared to outline progress against strategic objectives over the year. The last annual performance report for 24/25 was approved by the board. So that's really the additions that there are in this year's statement, perhaps compared to last year's statement. Quite a lot of things about standing orders, etc. They remain the same. So I've just focused on the changes that there have been, but you'll see that actually has been quite a lot. There's areas identified for improvement, or perhaps areas requiring further review, and I'll just highlight those. The revised IJB medium-term financial plan 27/28 to 30/31, as presented to the May 26 IJB, indicates total financial pressures of 0.6 million plan period. The paper highlighted a range of efficiency schemes have been identified to address the projected gap, and that categorised as grip and control, invest to save, and service redesign, and continued focus on delivering efficiencies both in year and in future years will be required to provide a sustainable financial position going forward. The second point there refers to reserves, and obviously in 25/26 a decision was made to expend or use the remaining reserves of 3.1 million in support of health budgets, and at that point the IJB had no reserves. An IJB reserve policy was approved by the board in December 25, which identifies a prudent level of general reserves as being 2% of revenue budget. And going forward, the value of reserves will be reviewed on an annual basis. Obviously, the previous agenda item made reference to underspends, which will lead to reserves. The final point relates to the local code of governance and the fact that the IJB doesn't have one. Now, this is actually an action that lies with Duncan and myself. We agreed that we would prepare one and present it to the IJB. We've still not done that. We will do it for September, and that's actually covered in agenda item 7. So I'll maybe talk about that a wee bit more then. So this really is the key arrangements that the IJB has in place under each of the 7 principles. In terms of conclusion and opinion, it is the opinion is that reasonable assurance can be placed upon the adequacy and effectiveness of the East Lothian IJB's governance arrangements and system of internal control, while recognising that further improvements are required to fully do compliance with the CIPFA SOLIS framework, delivering good governance in local government in order for the IJB to fully meet its principal objectives. Systems are in place to regularly review and improve governance arrangements and the system of internal control. Now, although we've actually prepared this statement, it's actually it goes out in the name of the chief from there. I think at the last meeting, Duncan explained that we were going to continue preparing this statement for this year. So this is not really internal audit's opinion. That comes in the next agenda item. This is an overall statement on the annual governance of the IJB. So I'd welcome any questions or comments, but equally, if you feel that there's anything that you think should be included in that's not included, or please raise those points, because this is very much a draft and it can be amended before going into the final accounts. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stuart. That was a very comprehensive explanation, so thank you for that. Does anyone have any questions for Stuart on that? Shameen?
Yeah, no, thanks, Elizabeth. Stuart, that's really helpful. It was just one area just for clarity around ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement. It was just to check. I know that all our board meetings are online. Could I check if they are available to the public? Because I know, for example, in Edinburgh, you can log in and listen while the meeting's going on, and then I know ours you can afterwards. It was just to get clarity to ensure that they are held, that the link is live if people do want to join us when the meeting's on, and I wasn't 100% sure if that was the case.
I'm not 100% sure myself, actually, so that is something I can check. I don't know.
We check.
Fiona,
that's great. Thank you.
Fiona Curry, do you want to come in on that, actually, as you raised your hand?
Yeah, the link itself it's not a webcast link in the same way that council meetings are run. The link itself is a link into the meeting. The meeting is recorded, and then the recording is placed on the website after the meeting has taken place, and people can view it on the website. There is possibility there for individuals to request the link to the meeting, and that has happened in the past, I think quite recently, and we often have a member of the press who's present in the meeting at the time. So it is an option that's available, although it's not, the link itself is not accessible on the website to sort of view the meeting in real time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thanks, Fiona. Stuart, do you want to come back in?
Yes, to in the first sentence under B, ensuring openness and comprehensive stakeholder engagement, to basically reflect what Fiona has just said there, providing perhaps a wee bit more detail about how it can be accessed. So I'm happy to amend that one sentence if that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you, Stuart. Okay, so I think we're being asked to, we've obviously considered it, and to approve the annual governance statement for inclusion in the accounts, if everyone's content with that. believe we are. Thank you. That concludes that item. Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you. That's item 5 now, is the annual internal audit opinion and report for 25-26.
Thank you. The IJB Audit and Risk Committee is asked to note that the annual internal audit opinion report 25-26 is a formal confirmation of internal audit's opinion on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the IJB's framework of governance, risk management and control for the year ended 31 March 2026. This is actually quite an important report because it is giving our overall opinion on governance, risk management and control based on the work that we've done during the year. I won't go through the whole report, but can I take you to section 3.7? Now, in section 3.7, in March 25, the committee approved the internal audit plan for 25-26. Now, that included 3 audits. Now, both audits, which may appear not too encouraging, but the audit of financial planning has been completed and was reported to the IJB Audit and Risk Committee in September 25. The audit provided reasonable assurance. The audits of shifting the balance and care and participation and engagement are currently both in progress, and the findings will be presented to the IJB Audit and Risk Committee in September 26. Ideally, we would have liked to present both of these to this committee. I'm afraid neither of them were ready. In terms of the audit of participation and engagement, I'm doing that audit, and I have had lots of correspondence with Kate Thornback and Jennifer Jarvis, and so far the audit is looking very positive. We've got a communications and engagement strategy 2630, which was approved in February 26. There was a lot of strategic plan engagement prior to the strategic plan being finalised, and there's a generally quite a good level of engagement in place. So the audit's only partly complete, but what we've looked at so far is encouraging. So I can take assurance from that. In terms of the shifting the balance of care audit, that's been undertaken by the NHS internal audit team. I think that there was a bit of some delays in starting that audit, but Mike and David, I don't know. I'm hoping that you've had at least an initial meeting with Russell in that respect. Is that right?
Yes, we have.
No.
David, did you want to come in?
No, Mike's just answered it. So we've recently just had a meeting with Russell in the last, I think it's probably the last 2 or 3 weeks, just to kind of talk about that audit.
Both of these reports will go to the September Audit and Risk Committee. If I was to move on, section 312 details a number of the factors that we've used in our assessment of the IJB's control environment. But most of them I've actually mentioned in the previous report. If I could take you on to 314, during 25-26, areas identified with scope for improvement included the following. The internal audit report on financial planning found that financial projections for the period from 25-26 to 29-30 forecast large overspends in the later years, and that the IJB have not formally approved a multi-year financial plan laying out how it will resource the delivery of its strategic plan. And I think this is something that we will look to hope will be in place, and obviously once that is implemented, that will provide assurance that the system of course is operating as intended. And Mike, we've correspondence about that last week and earlier this week. Overall, 3.6, it is our opinion, subject to the weakness outlined in section 3 and 4 above, that reasonable assurance can be placed on the overall adequacy and effectiveness of the IJB's framework of governance, risk management, control for the year ended 31 March 2026. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Stuart. I had a question about 314, but possibly more for Mike. Did anyone else have any other questions they wanted to ask at this stage? Shimeen?
Thanks, Elizabeth. It was around the long-term financial planning, the multi-year financial planning, and I know one of the things that I do remember previously we have looked at that, but I always find that really difficult and challenging as an IJB member when we might just have indicative figures, but we know what we might be receiving in the year ahead. And I just wonder about the practices of other IJB members. I find that quite challenging to be able to. I think officers can probably give us an idea of what our spend will look like with the pressures that we have, and how to the best of our ability we make sure they're as accurate as possible. But just to get an idea of how other IJBs are managing that long-term financial planning, where you would like to have a financial plan and that covers the timescale of your strategic plan, but I just find that quite difficult and challenging. It was more about what others might be, how they might be managing on this area of work.
Thanks, Shimeen. I've got David's hand up.
Yeah, I think Mike was going to come in as well, but I think Shimeen, you've highlighted obviously one of the challenges that we have. So clearly, we would want to create that robust multi-year financial plan, and I think we and other IJBs have had those conversations with our partners. I think one of the real challenges that we have found is that the settlements that our partners get from Scottish Government are only single-year settlements in the majority of cases. So I think with the best information that we've got, we're only able to plan on a year-by-year basis with that kind of forward look as best as we can, but recognizing that actually our partners are only receiving their settlements on a year-by-year basis. So we have looked at trying to improve that and see whether we could do a multi-year settlement, but I think it is very much influenced by the settlements that our partners get and the assurance that they have around the level of income that they are going to receive. So I think until we are able to smooth that out and be able to get more certainty about financial plans going forward, and I believe that is something that Scottish Government have talked about in general concept in terms of with their partners, then I think if we can get that, then hopefully we'll be able to get multi-year settlements that allow the IJB to plan for multi-year positions rather than the kind of annual process that we've got at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. My question was really on the same lines. I'm just interested actually if we could maybe, having had the internal audit view, I wondered if it might be possible for the external auditor to provide us with any comments on what others are doing in the circumstances, because presumably they're all in exactly the same position of not knowing about multi-year settlements. Thanks.
Yeah, so as your finance team highlighted, it's something that's been discussed across really the IJB community around how to look at this. I think there's something about distinguishing between the role of the IJB and the role of the Health and Social Care Partnership, and focusing on when the IJB is setting its strategy, it obviously has to be cognizant of around available resource, but working with the partners to identify where those what essentially can be delivered with the resources you have available. It's a common challenge we have across NHS where and local government where they don't have the multi-year funding settlement, but we would always be encouraging our audited bodies to estimate and scenario plan for those estimates. So where you see really good practice is where you see scenario plans taking place, and that really then informs some decision making. And if a scenario arises where the funding settlement is higher or is lower than projected, you at least then have an underlying strategy then to refer to, and that's where we would be encouraging the direction of travel for the IJB. We're never really going to have certainty. So even in scenarios where you have multi-year funding, the years 2, 3 and beyond are always going to be caveated by the fact that they're subject to change from the Scottish Government, because the Scottish Government budgetary approval process is only for a single year. So you're always going to have that caveat. So similarly with local government, you're going to have caveats in place. So that was what we'd be encouraging IGBs to take forward.
Thanks, John. Mike, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I suppose just to pick up on that, I think that was something that was highlighted in the annual accounts as well, and we did start to do that. One of our development days where we did scenario plan for getting full pay awards for our council delegated services, which we hadn't done in the past. So we are starting to look at that option, if you like, or that approach to see what see if it gives us a bit more of an indication of where we might end up. We can also, because we agreed that we would embark on a number of sort of programs of efficiency when we had our last development day back in January, and those were multi-year, potentially multi-year programs of efficiency. So that we knew that some of them would take longer than others to develop. So we would hope that as that work progresses, that we can, if we identify savings in future years, we can build those into the financial planning process as well. So that would be another way of looking at it. So we are moving in that direction, and we just need to keep going.
Thanks, Mike. Does anyone have any other questions on this issue? Okay. So I think that thank you for that report, Stuart. And I think it was we were just being invited to note the contents of that. So thank you for that. And I think that concludes that item, Fiona.
Thank you. Item 6 is the internal audit recommendations follow-up report.
Thank you. This is just a very short report, which is actually almost identical to the report that we submitted to the March IJB. We obviously follow up on our recommendations. In text, we'll follow up on the recommendations we made in reports issued in 24-25. And as was the case with we presented it in March last time, of the 10 recommendations we made, 9 recommendations had been implemented, and one was outstanding. One outstanding is detailed in Appendix 1, and unfortunately we've made ourselves the responsible officers for this recommendation, which maybe was not a good idea. It relates to the IJB local code of governance. Now, the IJB doesn't have a local code of governance, even though Sit for Solace argues that all organisations should. We've agreed to draft one and present it to the IJB. We've still not done that, but we're now saying we'll do that by September. In many ways, the local code of corporate governance is not going to look too different from the annual governance statement that we presented earlier at the meeting. It's still going to be structured around the seven core principles, but it's going to talk about the overall structure of the IJB, the board, the meeting, standing orders, financial regulations, etc. So it's more kind of the core arrangements that are in place. Then every year when we present the annual governance statement, we perhaps can say a bit less and just focus on the things that have changed. So we should have had that in place. We've not got it in place. I've spoken to Duncan about that. We have a template, and we will make sure that it is in place by September 26. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart, and thank you for confirming that. And we've got that noted that we'll hear from you at the next meeting about that. So thank you. And again, I think we're just invited to note the contents of that report. So does anyone have any questions before concluding? No. Okay. So thank you, Stuart, and that concludes that item, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7 is the 2026-27 Quarter 1 Risk Register Review, and this includes a refresh of the risk scoring matrix, and it's a report by the Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you, Fiona. So for those of us with good memories, you might recall that I did indicate I wanted to have this refresh of the risk scoring matrix after we'd approved the risk management policy and strategy back in March. So this is me following up on that. And I just want to take a few minutes to make sure that we're all familiar with this key tool in the risk management process. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this will come up and people can someone tell me that they can see that, because that's all I can see at the moment. Oh, there we go. Does that come up?
Yes.
Okay, so this is our risk scoring matrix, and this sets out how we arrive at a score and a level of risk for our risks. So each risk has a calculated score based on the likelihood of it occurring and on the significance or the consequence of its impact. And you can see how those numbers pull together. So there's 5 different consequential impacts, and there's 5 different likelihoods or levels of likelihood and levels of impact. And it's just a basic grid system that calculates the score depending on the level of likelihood and the level of consequent impact. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. And when we use this information, we also assign a target level to each of our risks, so that if a risk is assessed as having a very high level of risk, so a score of 20, we may assign a target level of 10, and therefore seek to bring that risk down to that target level through controls and actions that we take over a period of time. And that's how the risk review, the risk register and the quarterly risk review process is supposed to flow, if you like. So if anybody's got any questions on this, feel free to ask them now. Otherwise, I'll just take that down if it makes sense to everyone. I've just put the colours in to try and distinguish between the different levels.
Thanks, Mike. That makes total sense to me. I'm just wondering, and when I used to be on Edinburgh IJB Audit and Risk Committee, they had the risk matrix actually embedded within the risk register, so that every time you saw it, you could have sight of the matrix. So could we just add that so that we've always got that to hand?
Absolutely. If I can find my pen, I'll do that. Oh, there we go.
Thank you. Did anyone else have any questions about the risk matrix? I can't see everyone's hands, but I don't think so.
Right.
Oh, Shameen, sorry.
Sorry, my hand keeps, is that it up? Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. It was just to ask the last column where it's got likelihood and you've got remote, unlikely, possible, unlikely, almost certain. Could you just talk us through that? So there's remote and then unlikely and then possible and then unlikely and then almost certain.
Well, unlikely under 4 is wrong. It should be likely.
Right. Okay.
So thank you. Sorry.
Right. Okay.
That's a cut and paste error. So apologies for that. But
okay.
Well
that's
spotted.
Good. That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So that should be likely. Is that okay? I'll
yeah.
take that.
And that correlates with what you've got in your reports.
So when we go through the risk register review and the templates that we've added to that, then the scores that you'll see in those templates are based on this risk matrix, and I'll add this to the quarterly reports that we do, so that everybody's got it in a constant view when we're talking through those risks. So I'll stop sharing now, and we'll just go through the risk register review, if that's okay.
Yes, thanks.
So, so that the paper that I've submitted is the risk register review, and attached to that are the new templates that we're proposing to have in place going forward as an addition to the report. So we can, when we go through the report and we look at each risk, we'll look at the template at the same time, and if there's comments around the templates are a straight lift from the risk register. So we've taken all the relevant information that, and put it into the templates. So we've got a consistent review of each of the risks from the information in the risk register. So there are probably typos and things in there that we will need to iron out and sort going forward. So it's just to advise that it's taken straight from the risk register as it stands at the moment. And if we want to make changes and so on, we can do. So in terms of the risk review process going forward, we're now looking to have a process that reviews each risk based on the information presented on the template, and consider whether the current score assigned to each risk is reflective of the likelihood and consequence of that risk occurring, and also based on the controls that are in place. So that's what we'll do. So if we jump to 3.5 now, I'm not having a very good day with my my numbers today in terms of paragraphs and so on. So I've just looked and seen that we've got more than one 3.5. But if you go to page 2 of the report, and it's the first risk 3924, and we've also got that risk information from the risk register on the template, the first template that you'll find as well. And what we're looking at in terms of this risk is, in terms of an update of where we are, the risks around financial resources may be insufficient to sustain the strategic plan. So we can reflect on the fact that at the end of last financial year, the health delegated services overspent by just over 2 million, and there was a significant underspend in the council delegated services. So NHS Lothian has contributed an additional 2 million to break even the health delegated services, and the council delegated service balance was transferred to the reserves. So there's kind of almost a mixed picture there. But when you look at the updated medium-term financial plan that we presented at the last at the IJB, you can see that the forecast overspends year on year, or the gaps are still significant. So the question is, do we consider the level and score of this risk to be appropriate, and do we want to make any changes in that respect? And just noting, I suppose, that in terms of the reserves, when the last time we did have reserves, this was still a very high rated risk at that point in time. So it's just to point that out, because we've gone from having reserves to not having reserves, and now we're back to having reserves again. So
but does anyone have any comments on that one? Jeremy.
Thank you. Sorry, like Shameen is acting a bit slow. When it says at the bottom of that chart, or that page related to 3924, it says likelihood current is likely and consequence is extreme. Could you just talk me through what you mean by extreme there?
I suppose extreme is that we no longer are able to function because we don't have the resources to carry on. So the likelihood is it's potentially likely, because we are forecasting significant overspends year on year, and the consequence would be that we would not be able to, in my view, not be able to operate as an organisation if we didn't have the finances to go forward.
So presumably how extreme it would be would depend on how much the overspend was. So if there's a small overspend, perhaps extreme is a bit extreme to use a word. I mean, is it I mean, I'm trying to get a handle on it. As if there is a small overspend, is it still extreme? Or if there's a bigger overspend, is it extreme?
Well, I suppose it's a wider picture as well, in the sense that our partners, as part of the scheme of integration, if we do overspend and we've exhausted all other avenues, we are able to approach our partners for additional funding at the end of the year. But if our partners are in a similar position to us, in that they don't have the resources, then that would be a factor in all of this, if that makes sense. So it may not necessarily be the magnitude of the overspend, it's more about how it occurs and whether it can be supported in other ways.
Okay, thank you.
I saw David Hood put his hand up in response to that question. David, were you wanting to come in on this point?
Yeah, I was just going to pick up in terms of the nuance around extreme and the implications of that. So Jeremy, I think one of the things to probably say that if we are in a overspend position, then the consequence of that is that we're not necessarily going to be able to deliver our strategic plan and our priorities as an IJB. And then that obviously has consequences for the people of East Lothian and what we want to deliver for our residents, our patients, and our people. And that I think in terms of that categorization then becomes quite a risk. So I think there is a significant risk, and I think that the language that's used here is extreme, but I think it's in that context of being able to deliver what we want to deliver for the people of East Lothian. And if we are overspent, we need to take action to address that overspend over and beyond what we've already done, which will then have knock-on consequences to our residents. And some of that will be undesirable. That's probably an understatement in terms of that undesirability, but that's where the kind of extreme kind of nature comes from, or at least in part.
Okay, David, thank you for that.
Thanks, David. Shamina, I see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, no, thanks, Elizabeth. And Mike, it was just to check on where this would sit within this report, just what was picked up at the last IJB around the risk of the offer letter from NHS Lothian and what we received last year to what we received this year, and the gap was around, I think, around about 20 million. I just wondered where would that risk? I know that one of the things is officers are going to go in, have a look at what what reassurances we'll get from NHS Lothian about that gap. I just wanted to kind of, as a reassurance, where that would sit in our risk register.
As a risk itself, it's not a risk in our risk register at this point in time, because I don't consider it to be a risk. And I'll bring a response back to the next IJB that hopefully gives the IJB assurance that that's not a risk, because it's a reflection on the process and the way that the funding flows within the NHS side of the house, if you like. That's how NHS bodies are funded, and it's how they pass on, how they are then able to pass on their funding. So I don't think it's a risk at this point in time.
Okay. Thank you. Tricia?
I think I'm partly coming back in on Jeremy's point, because I find it very distressing to see these risks in red. But having been at the NHS Lothian Audit and Risk Committee all yesterday morning, they too have risks in red, and very similar themes in terms of if we don't have enough money, we can't do the job. And I think we have to look at it in context, because this is also about sending a message to those out with our organisation. And the message is actually, if we don't have the money, we can't do what we're supposed to do. So I think it's about honesty rather than anything else, and telling it as it is. But I too find it quite uncomfortable to sit with these risks, but I think what we're doing is calling it out as it is. But perhaps Mike or David would be able to explain, or perhaps our audit friends would do that. But certainly my understanding is this is about telling a story about how it is. I don't like sitting with these red risks, but this seems to be how we tell the story of where we are. I don't know if any of that makes sense.
Got hands up here first from David and then John.
Yeah, no, I think it's a helpful point, Trish, but I think one of the things I would say is there's a level of risk that is acceptable and there is a level of risk that is not acceptable. And I think as a principle, where we've got something is very high, then that sits within the kind of unacceptable, and that's okay, what do we need to do? Now, at times, a high risk may be tolerable. It's clearly not ideal, but it's that balance between risk and outcomes. So I think it's in some respects helpful and good that you feel uncomfortable having something that's very high risk, because I think that's probably the way that we should all feel. But then it is also about being realistic about what that level of risk is, and then what is our mitigating actions and how do we manage that to try and reduce that level of risk as far as we can down to something that we think is the right balance and that is tolerable.
Thanks, David. Thanks. John, do you want to come in?
Yeah, it was actually similar to David's point. The way I would always see a risk register is it's the risk to delivery of your strategy, and in this case, I know you mentioned earlier around the ability to service the people of East Lothian, and there's a degree of sort of judgment on that what is it you're looking to achieve from your strategy, and it's actually partly linked back to the financial plan around what are your strategic outcomes, what are your strategic objectives, and linking back to to the delivery of those. So if they're not going to be delivered, that then creates a risk. The response to that risk and the mitigating actions that you were discussing will vary. So some of it will be engaging with your partners in order to secure additional funding where possible, and it might be actually through the Scottish Government ultimately to get additional funding where that's available. Alternatively, it'll be looking to reduce costs. So how can you deliver things more efficiently and effectively to deliver the same outcomes that you're looking to achieve? But thirdly, it might be actually reviewing your strategic objectives and saying, well, what is actually achievable in East Lothian? So what are the desired outcomes? So in a strange way, you might actually mitigate the risk by changing the target, if you like, of what you're looking to achieve. But yeah, I think you're right. It should these are kind of areas that should be uncomfortable discussions, because it's about setting that strategic direction.
Thank you, John. Are you happy with that response, Patricia?
Yes, I am. I feel I've been learning a lot about audit over the last couple of years, and I don't know whether many or any of the wider population of East Lothian do tune into this, but I think it's important that we have these discussions and we are transparent about it and where we do feel uncomfortable and what the nature of the problem is. So I think both David and John's responses have been very, very helpful there. So thank you for that.
That's great. Thank you. Mike, do you want to carry on with your report?
Okay. So are we leaving the score as it stands at very high on this one? Yep. Okay.
Thanks.
So the next one is risk 3925, which is operational resources may be insufficient to deliver the strategic plan. So similar, but more around the operational resources. So we do still have pressures in our services, and just noting them, particularly within prescriber and care at home. We've got levels of vacancies across social care services in particular, and challenges in terms of getting our workforce up to establishment. And we're linking in with the council on in terms of the housing department and what can be identified going forward that the IJB can use in terms of housing resources, like the coring cluster that we had recently in Faside. So there is work going on there, but still recognising that we have these pressures. The risk score at the moment is 20, which is very high as well. And I'm recommending that it stays high, very high, but open to discussion.
Does anyone have any comments, questions? No. I'm certainly happy to agree that that it stays as it is. I think seeing some nods.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike.
So the next two risks are rated as higher in terms of the risk register. The first one we're looking at is 4018, which is the impact of partners' decisions. So just to reiterate that the challenges that we face are similar to the challenges that our partners are facing in terms of the financial landscape going forward in the current year and future years. So we are in this together in that respect. We meet regularly. We have quarterly meetings with our partners, senior finance, senior management level across both partners and ourselves. So we are regularly in contact and sharing our information around our financial position and our performance on a quarterly basis. So those processes are in place, and I'm recommending that risk remains at a high risk.
Thanks, Mike. Everyone happy? Thanks. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And the next one is our risk 5220, which is demographic pressures. And it sounds a bit like a broken record, I think, on this one, but we know that our population continues to increase year on year. We are still very high, second highest in Scotland in terms of our population increase, and the elderly contingent of that population continues to increase as well. And that has an impact on the demand for our services across a range of our services, and the pressures that creates within those services. It also impacts on our spend, like prescribing spend as well. So it has an impact on direct care and on our other levels of care, other aspects of care. So again, I'm suggesting that we don't change the level of this or the score on this risk.
Thanks, Mike. Shameen, come in.
Yeah, no, Mike, I support what you said. It's one of the things I thought it was worth just having a discussion and think about is the public service reform agenda and what that means for us in East Lothian. I know we had one development session where we kind of skimmed on that paper. It might be something for us to revisit as an IJB of what that means for us. I know Audit Scotland have produced some really good one report around with the Royal Society of Edinburgh around public sector reform and had a roundtable discussion around and that's quite a good kind of document to look at. But I just wondered, I hear a lot now around the public service reform, and you're hearing quite a lot of narrative from the government of what that might mean and what does that mean for an area like us that's growing, that's got a growing population, having to deliver more services, more complex services, and what just to better understand. I think it's probably early stages, unless David or Mike or John, you might have heard more around certain areas that might be prioritised over others, etc. But I'm just mindful that we keep an eye on that and what it means for us, because sometimes it makes me think, are we shrinking public services to try and meet the financial envelope, or is it, and that would be difficult and challenge for us, or delivering things differently and how we progress that through the integration agenda.
Thanks. David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, you've put me on the spot a little bit here, Shameen. So take it in that context in terms of the public sector reform publications and documentation and the strategy that was outlined by the Scottish government, I think was it late 2025 in terms of that direction of travel. But within that strategy, I think there are a number of key components, and I think it is important just how it reflects into the IJB conversations, because a lot of it is about doing things more effectively and more efficiently, and that transformation on a kind of once to Scotland type approach. So whether that's digital automation, that type of things. So I think there are about 15 or 16, maybe more work streams within that kind of program that the Scottish government has set out. And some of it may be structural changes in terms of how things are delivered across Scotland. And I think there's obviously been some stuff in the media around that fairly recently, but I think more of it is around how do we use the resource that we have as a public sector more effectively and more efficiently? How do we embrace things like technology, different ways of working, so that actually the demand that is coming, and we know it is already here and it's going to get higher and higher, then how we're able to meet that demand and use the resources, whether that's people, money, assets, etc., as effectively as we can, and how do we collaborate? And I think this is where IJBs are in a very strong position, in that actually spanning across health and social care, there's that opportunity to work together with our partners to think about, okay, how do we deliver things that are right for East Lothian, recognising the role across health and social care and across NHS and council resources. So yeah, I think that bit about efficient, more effective use of resources and doing things differently is that kind of priority, rather than kind of cutting things to make the finances fit.
Okay.
Thanks, David. John, I think you had your hand up, but you've taken it down. Did you want to come in on anything there?
No, David really kind of covered off the main points. The one thing I have seen coming through from just from other public bodies is just keeping it on almost at the horizon. So having a bit of a horizon scan when it comes to risks, and keeping it on the radar. Within the health sector, there's obviously increased working at the subnational level and keeping monitoring in terms of the individual boards still have their statutory responsibilities, and it shouldn't really change the relationship with the IJBs, but almost having that awareness to keep it monitored is probably the one thing.
Mike, I'm just mindful, like, obviously we're discussing a different risk, just so we're discussing demographic pressures, but I'm wondering that the risk that we're moving on to next, on impact of legislation, obviously at the moment the risk that we've got as it is covers 3 different things. Do we actually now need to expand that risk to also keep on our radar the subnational planning and the public service reform, or are they not? Is it too soon to put them on the risk register? So I'm asking the question, really.
I'm not sure I have an answer to that. It may be slightly too early to put it on the risk register, unless we feel confident that we understand the impact of it, or the fact that it is a risk. I don't know if what I can do is certainly look and see if other IJBs have got that, if it's reflected on other IJBs risk register, and feedback on that.
Thanks. That'd be great. David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, not to disagree with Mike, but I think it's probably quite helpful that we do actually recognise the potential implications of public sector reform. I think the way that risk is categorised on our risk register at the moment is very much around the National Care Service. And I think things have probably moved on in terms of the National Care Service, in terms of where it was as a risk to where it is today. But I think we've got that wider risk in terms of the public sector reform and how that kind of fits in together, and how we articulate that in the right way. But also not just from a risk perspective, but the opportunities that it will bring as well, and reflecting those.
Thanks.
So we do actually have the risk reform or Care Reform Act on our register. So we've got elements of it on our register, as you say already. Sorry, I misunderstood you, Chair. I thought you were talking about the subnational stuff. So my apologies.
I was as well. I think actually, if maybe what would be helpful, I had some comments on 5279. So maybe it'd be helpful if we finish the previous risk on the demographic pressures and then kind of maybe have a bit more of a discussion on the impact of legislation risk. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
So did you have anything else to say on 5220?
No, just to say that the risk score we've got at the moment is 16, which is high. So it's whether anybody thinks we need to change that.
I'm comfortable with that. Everybody's comfortable? Yep. Okay, thanks, Mike.
Okay. So the next risk is 5279, and that is the one that we have three elements to, three strands to. There's the Employer National Insurance, there's the Care Reform Scotland Act, and there's immigration. So those are the three aspects that we have currently on the risk register around the impact of legislation. So I suppose just concentrating on what we've got at the moment, in terms of the Employer National Insurance, we recently had an IJB commissioning board where we informed or we agreed to feed back to Audit Scotland, to Scotland Excel, sorry, through the framework that they have, that we would not provide additional uplift to 4 providers who had highlighted significant financial pressures that they were experiencing and seeking additional uplift for their contracts. The decision was made based on the fact that those 4 providers did not indicate they were going into financial, they were going to cease trading. So we realise though that there are difficulties and they are experiencing difficulties out there, and there will be other providers as time goes on that will come back looking for additional uplift, and we will have to make some decisions around that. But at the moment, we've stuck to our approach, which is that we didn't receive any uplift for that particular aspect of inflation, so we can't pass anything on. In terms of the Care Reform Scotland Act, one of the key components in that is around the breaks for carers, and we still don't have any clarity on exactly what that will entail for us as an IJB, how it will be implemented, and if there's a cost, how it will be funded. So we still wait clarity on that. And in terms of the immigration strand of this, I've asked both partners, and there is no impact that they can see at this point in time as a result of any policies around immigration. So that's the 3 elements of risk that we have at the moment. So the question is, do we want to continue with those 3, or do we want to add to or change the approach of this particular risk? Is that what I'm hearing?
Thanks, Mike. I think what I was wondering is, I think what we've got in the pack at the moment is obviously this is like a draft version of the revised risk register. And I think what you have on page 77 of the pack is the sort of updated wording about care reform. But what we've got in the pack still obviously does refer to, I think, what David was talking about, which was the NCS legislation.
Yes.
So in terms of when we're looking at this risk as a whole, I wondered if the risk effect should be made much more general, so it covers all various different types of legislative impact, as opposed to a specific thing, and then we can talk about the more specific ones elsewhere on that page, so that we do still cover care reform, we do still cover e-national insurance. Whether or not we still need to include the changes to immigration law, I don't know. And then maybe also have the stuff that's on the horizon with public service reform, and also the subnational planning. That I wonder if we should basically make this a sort of all-encompassing risk that's basically covering all those bases. But that's just my thoughts. Thanks. Shameen, see you've got your hand up.
Yeah, just from earlier around the challenges that we faced around workforce. As an IJB, we've we've passed a workforce strategy, and I wonder if that could be one of the controls, Mike, that we're reassured that the strategy that we've passed is meeting some of those issues around workforce or immigration, etc. So we've got that reassurance.
Okay. Yeah, the controls will need to be probably reviewed as well if we're changing if we're just refining this and making it a bit more of a catch-all type approach in terms of what we've just discussed. Okay.
Does anyone else have any comments?
So in terms of the actual score that we have around this risk at the moment, its target was 9, a score of 9, and it's got a score of 9. So it's meeting its target. It's at the same level as the target level. So what we could decide to do is to not report this risk going forward. I think that we will continue to report it because it will still have relevance. But when we get a risk score that matches or is below the target level, then there's an option to say, well, we've put in place controls that meet that risk, and we don't need to look at it anymore on a risk review register. But I suggest that we keep it on the register at the moment, and we continue to assess whether we think it needs the score needs to change going forward, or maybe the target score needs to change.
I'd certainly be in favour of keeping it on the risk register to keep it on all our minds. And see Shameen's nodding, and Tricia. Anyone else getting Jeremy as well? Okay, yep. So it seems like we've got David Spinney as well. I think, are you happy to keep it on? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So the last risk on the risk register review is 5486, which is around accurate financial forecasting. And at the last IJB, I was asked to pull together a very short presentation on this, because we said we would look at it when we came to the Audit and Risk Committee and the risk register review. So I'm going to share my screen again with a couple of slides and just take you through them, which hopefully will explain this risk. And can you let me know if you can see that, please?
Yes.
And read it as well, which would be helpful. So, okay. So there's only 2 slides. And so what I've tried to set out here is the historical issues and how this particular risk came onto a risk register. And it does go back a good few years. It's back to 2023, I think. So it's been on the register for a while, and it arrived around some challenging situations within council in terms of business continuity plans. There was also significant variations in commission services. Reports that were coming to the IJB were showing significant variations in the spend from quarter to quarter and in the forecast position. Now that was partly due to information used from Mosaic and how it was being interpreted and how it was being analysed. And there was also, I suppose, workforce challenges around the whole finance support to that as well, in terms of continuity of staffing within the finance function. So that's how the risk arrived on our risk register. And what we've done since then, and the controls that we've put in place to get to where we are at this point in time. So the finance department is returned to business as usual on March 2024, and that stayed that way. A new principal accountant has been appointed. There's been other appointments in the background around the use, someone dedicated to using Mosaic and reporting on Mosaic. There was an internal audit recommendations that were put in place and implemented around that as well. And we've got more extensive use of Mosaic and how we interpret and measure variations between the information or around the information that is in Mosaic and that comes out of Mosaic, so that we've got more accurate understanding of interpretation of that information. We're quarterly forecasting for all our services now across all of the services, and we're looking at monthly exception reporting as well for the majority of those services, so mainly around the commissioning, learning disabilities and adult social work services. So we've put in a lot of improvements and changes in terms of resources and in terms of how we report and how we measure things within the services and around the use of Mosaic. So we have a lot more assurance around how that's all working. However, we did have an unexpected, I'm trying to move on to the next slide and it's not, yeah, so we did have a bit of an unexpected outcome at the end of the last financial year, and the movement between the third quarter and the fourth quarter resulted in a fairly significant underspend. And that's a breakdown, a fairly high level breakdown of that underspend, or of a swing in that underspend. So you can see there that the biggest number is in the staffing. And what we've recognised is that we now need to look at staffing on a monthly exception basis as well, and use the information that we have in the ledger, which will help us to understand the number of staff we have in post against our establishment in a more accurate way. We also have trends that we've built up over the years that we can use to try and forecast forward what our staffing levels might be in the coming months. There's also stronger scrutiny of the income side of things. We did have some movement on, excuse me, on the income side as well. A lot of it, or some of it may not have been predictable, if you like, but there still was some movement around that, and a greater awareness of areas of fluctuation. So we now have a better understanding of where things might change from quarter to quarter in a bit more detail, and we can start to focus in on that and make sure that we cover every base to the best of our ability. So we're putting in place some refinements to what's already there to try and strengthen the forecasting going forward. So that was the feedback that I wanted to share on the actual occurrence in terms of the year-end underspend and how it came about. I suppose the question is, do we want to change anything within this risk as it stands at the moment? So it's got a target of 4. It's got a current risk score of 6, so it is above its target, although it is a medium risk at the moment, and the target is a medium risk as well. So the question is, do we want to change anything around this risk?
Thanks, Mike. If I could just ask a question in terms of the likelihood. So first of all, sorry, I really appreciate everything you just explained to us, and those slides were really helpful, and I'm pleased to see that we're moving to looking at staffing monthly and refinements to strengthen forecasting, so we've got greater awareness going forward. So that's very good. What I'm just wondering about is, in terms of the likelihood on the risk assessment, it's unlikely, and I'm just wondering, I appreciate that where this risk started life in 2022 is very different to the risk that we have been discussing in terms of the underspend, but is it right to say it's unlikely when it actually there has been forecasting that wasn't accurate?
Yeah, I suppose it's very difficult to say it is unlikely on the basis of what you've just said. The question is, I suppose, do we consider it to be likely based on the refinements that we've made, or do we think it is now it can remain as unlikely based on the controls or the refinements that we are putting in place, or do we think that we should change that score even with those refinements in place?
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this? David Hood.
Yeah, maybe just as we're kind of talking this through in terms of likelihood, I think one of the things, so this applies both to East Lothian Council, but also NHS Lothian as well, in terms of potential swings in our forecast. That there is something for me in terms of one of the things that Mike has picked up in terms of how we can improve some of our forecasting, particularly around the pay side of things. I think the other two things I'd probably add into it is a level of materiality and significance in terms of some of the variances that have come up, and how we're never going to be in a position to get that forecasting exactly right on a budget that runs into hundreds of millions of pounds in terms of those scale. And I think that the other thing probably just to reflect is some of these swings and variances that we do have are quite significant financially, but they're based on unknown information. So it may be, for example, guardianship or a court order is awarded to somebody becomes self-funding rather than local authority funded, or we have a client who's receiving very high levels of care, sadly has to go into hospital. These can make six-figure swings in a very short period of time. So we're never, and I think it's that bit about, there's an element of risk that these things will happen, and they'll happen every year. And I think we need to a certain extent, accept that and recognise that that is part of the reality and the risk that we deal with. It's whether we've got the underlying processes and systems in place to be able to minimise those things impacting on our known financial position. And I think with some of the controls that have been put in place, and particularly the previous audit around adult social care, and that was definitely a significant thing in terms of those improvements, but also some of the things that Mike's talked around, for example, around the staffing monitoring, moving from quarterly to monthly in terms of different approach. I think that risk is, as far as we can control it, relatively well controlled. Clearly, there's always improvements you can do on these things, but I don't think it's a significant risk that we should be doing something fundamentally different than what we're currently doing at the moment to try and mitigate that risk.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful. And yeah, the move to, for example, the monthly reporting on staffing does seem like an important change for the positive. David Binney, you wanted to come in?
Yes, just some general thoughts. I agree very much with what David Hood was saying there. And yes, indeed, the monthly reporting on staffing costs and utilisation is a very sensible thing to do. But fundamentally, there are, I guess, two basic ways to kind of manage this. One is that you work with a vacancy assumption, because you know from experience that you are unlikely to be able to spend all your staffing budget. So you reduce the budget at the outset, and therefore the budget balances out. But again, Patricia made points about making vacancy assumptions earlier in the meeting as being not a desirable thing. And indeed, the desirable thing is to be able to spend all your staffing money on staff. The alternative is to have a plan in place that when budgets are not fully spent, that we have actions to reinvest that money to enhance the service elsewhere or within that area, or to carry it forward. So this is quite a long way of saying, I think this is quite a kind of manageable risk from the things that we've done and the things that I've just said. So I'm not sure that the rating necessarily needs to be as high as it might be perceived at the moment.
Thanks, David. And Shameen?
No, I agree with the comments that have been made. What I'd be looking as an audit and risk committee, what I'd be looking for in the controls in place is to get an assurance from the chief finance officer that all the, as you say, David, that it's about the processes. We don't need to know what they are, but just to get an assurance that that is happening, and they can assure us that those processes and procedures are in place to be able to manage this.
Thanks, Shameen. Mike, did you have anything else you wanted to come back on?
Not specifically. I will update the controls to reflect that the conversation that we've had in terms of the changes that were being put in place, and we'll leave the score for that particular risk as it is. So the question is, at the end of all of this, is are we happy with the risk review templates that we've introduced, recognising that some of them need a little bit of tidying up, but are we happy to continue with an approach of having those documents in support of the quarterly review paper that I'll bring, and reflecting on the scores in each review?
Thanks, Mike. I'm certainly happy. I think it looks good, and I like the format. I think it's quite user friendly, so I'm pleased with that. Anyone else got any? David Binney.
I endorse that entirely. It's much more akin to a system that I used in the Scottish Government, and I think it's much easier to understand and use and to interrogate.
Good.
Thanks. Nobody else got any comments? Doesn't look like it. Yep. Thank you. Okay, so I think we're happy, Mike.
Excellent. Okay. That's fine. I'll meet those.
I think was there a specific action other than just we've got to approve consider the revised template and revisions, and I think we have, and I think we're content. So I think that would conclude that item.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you. That's all of our business today, Chair. So if you're happy, we can ask Alana to stop the recording.
Yes, please.